The Honda VFR, a beautiful, fun, comfortable bike that corners better than you would expect, is incredibly stable at highway speeds, and has good torque and by far one of the best sounds in all of motorcycling history. I'm going to cut no corners with this video. This is not for the faint of heart. This video is long and will go into as many details as I can get into. I love the VFR and I want to do it justice by making a proper video. If you enjoy this content, then please do me a huge favor and leave a like and subscribe. The more support I receive, the more videos like this I can produce, and I'm getting very close to my goal of 100,000 subscribers, but I need your guys' help and it won't cost you a dime. Before we indulge into the history of the VFR, I need to start off by decoding the name VFR. VFR stands for V4 Racing. All VFRs will feature a V4 engine. It is in the name. There will never be an inline-4 VFR or a V-twin VFR, only a V4. And the R in VFR means that these bikes are either race bikes or race-inspired in some way or another in their DNA. When most of us think of the VFR, this is what we see. A solid commuter bike that's comfortable and practical. But that's not how the VFR started. The VFR started as a weapon designed by Honda to take onto the racetrack. However, the first VFR really wasn't a VFR. In fact, it wasn't even called a VFR, but its DNA runs deep into this bike, the NR500. The NR500 was a 500cc V4 that used oval pistons, the first and only bike to ever have such a feat. The NR was an amazing engineering marvel that is just so unique and one of a kind that it will forever go down in history as one of the most spectacular motorcycles of all time. But alas, it failed, and it failed hard. The NR was plagued with reliability issues which even caused some of the bikes to crash. Such failures included an oil leak that covered the rear tire, causing Mick Grant to crash on its debut in 1979 during the British Grand Prix. After that, Honda and their NR500 never really recovered. The bike just wasn't competitive enough since it was so complex that engineers couldn't make fine-tune adjustments easily, and Honda abandoned the NR series just 2 years later. The failures of the NR forced Honda to develop a new race bike, the NS500, which was a 500cc two-stroke V3 motorcycle, to take over for the NR500. But Mr. Honda actually didn't like two-strokes. He found the buzzing two-stroke engines to be crude and simple. Mr. Honda was an accomplished engineer and his fascination was with the four-stroke, multiple cylinders, and multiple valve engines. He wanted to create a V4 four-stroke engine to live, and live it did, and it did in a big way. Honda was developing a bike that you've likely never even heard of, but it was so amazing that you won't believe that it was made in 1982, and this bike was the RS1000RW. One of the engineers said, "Before releasing this bike on the market, we wanted to show the world the amazing performance of the V4 engine, so we wanted to win the most prestigious race in America, the Daytona 200. This machine, the RS1000RW, was powered by a racing prototype version of the production engine. Although it used round pistons, the 90-degree V4 engine was loaded with NR500 technology. The 1000cc V4 engine produced a mind-boggling amount of horsepower at the time, 150. However, the engine's massive power and high speed proved too much for the tires and it finished in second place. But the potential of Honda's V4 engine was obvious. In 1982, Honda released the very first production V4 engines in the VF750C Magna, VF750S Sabre, and VF400F. And just 1 year later, Honda released the very first sporty V4 motorcycle they ever created, the very first Interceptor, the 1983 Honda VF750F Interceptor V45. It used the exact same engine as the Magna and Sabre. The Interceptor's V4 748cc engine was deemed the perfect engine. It had great power all throughout the rev range and was extremely well balanced. And in 1984, just 1 year later, Honda released 3 more Interceptors, the VF500F, the VF700F, and the VF1000F. And of course, Honda continued to make their VF750F as well, so 4 different iterations of the Interceptor were shown on the showroom floor. It may seem odd at first that Honda would have a VF700 and a VF750, but there's actually a good reason for that, and we can all blame Harley Davidson. In 1983, American President Ronald Reagan placed a 45% tariff on Japanese motorcycles over 700 cc's in an effort to save one American company, Harley Davidson. And it worked, because Harley became profitable in 1986 for the first time in 5 years. Some people say that these tariffs likely saved Harley-Davidson from a certain death, but at the cost of harming Japanese models for years to come, including our beloved 750cc Interceptor. Regardless if it helped Harley or not, the tariffs were there until 1987, and that is why you see a 700cc model in the lineup, so they can avoid the unfair markup imposed by the United States government. However, Honda had another big issue at the time. Our Interceptors had a fatal flaw, and that flaw was the camshaft. The camshaft had issues with one of the bearings going out, and because of that they were nicknamed the chocolate camshaft. With Honda's reputation online, they knew they had to do something dramatic, and Honda decided to solve the problem the only way they knew how back in the 80s, and that was by over-engineering the hell out of the engine. But before we can get into that and the street legal bikes, we need to move back to the race bikes, because as we know, that R in VFR stands for racing, so it is incredibly important. In 1985, the designation of Honda's V4 powered race bikes changed from RS to RVF, a change indicative of significant technical advances, and the RVF 750 was born. The RVF 750 won many important international races, including the Boldor 24-hour and Suzuka 8-hour endurance races. And in 1986, Honda released the VFR 750F, which was developed based on the feedback from the RVF 750. The new VFR solved Honda's camshaft issues by replacing the whole chain-driven system with a gear-driven system. These gear-driven cams were so over-engineered that they would last the life of the engine, and they also sounded pretty cool too. This new VFR also featured an incredibly advanced aluminum twin-spar chassis and staggeringly high build quality. The VFR 750 set the standard, and its impressive performance made it an instant favorite of the sport bike riders around the world. This was the first official generation of the Honda VFR. It also helps to note that during this time in 1986, Honda released the awesome little VFR 400 in Japan, and eventually it was imported into the UK, but they didn't sell many models thanks to the high price of the bike. The 400 was even more expensive than the 750, so nobody really bought them, and in the early 90s, the 400 was discontinued entirely, which is a shame because that was such a cool little bike. Now back to the 750. Despite being classified as a sports tourer, the VFR's handling was on par with the best sport bikes of the day. Not only did Ron Halsam race on a totally stock VFR at the 1986 Transatlantic Trophy race at Donington and finished in an amazing 3rd place on a sports touring bike, the VFR also even finished 8th at the Suzuka 8-hour race. And because of this amazing success, the VFR sold like hotcakes. Honda made a couple small tweaks in 1988 by swapping out the 16-inch front and 18-inch rear wheel for 17-inch wheels and making a few cosmetic changes, but essentially they let the VFR do the selling for them. This was the 2nd generation of the VFR. However, this revised model was never imported into the United States. In fact, the VFR was dropped altogether in 1988 from the United States, so we never even got the 2nd generation. However, back in 1987, Honda released the VFR 750R, also known to us as the RC30. Because of the homologation rules, Honda actually had to release a certain number of these to the public. It was first released in Japan and then finally in the United States and Europe in 1990. This is the most unique and rare VFR that has ever been produced, and it's considered the holy grail of VFRs. The looks of this bike are so elegant and timeless. The RC30 wasn't just a looker though, it was also a performer, and it performed by winning the World Superbike Championship in both 1988 and 1989. And in 1990, we saw a new 3rd generation of the Honda VFR, also known to us as the RC36. Now that Honda had figured out the engine and reliability, they decided to add a bit of flair to the VFR. This major redesign saw changes to the forks, wheels, and chassis, fitted with a brand new single-sided swing arm, which is now considered a trademark feature of all VFRs. The weight did go up by a massive 36 pounds thanks to these changes, but most people didn't care. The RC36 had a price tag the average person could afford, yet it had a unique design and engine that made it feel exotic, and at the same time it was dead reliable. I actually owned an RC36. Mine was from 1991. I can attest how great the handling was on that bike. I loved mine. It was an amazing motorcycle and I wouldn't mind owning one again. Honda really did a fantastic job with that bike.
So I've had the question before, what is an Italian tune-up? Well, this is what an Italian tune-up is. An hour on a VFR on back roads. I'm crazy, dude.
In 1994, we saw a redesign of the Honda VFR750 and a new model release known to us as the RC45. But first, let's talk about this redesign. The 1994 Honda VFR750 is commonly referred to as the 4th generation. Honda altered the 4th generation VFR with over 200 changes. They were mainly aimed at shedding weight and improving the bike's handling. The results were an 18-pound drop in weight. The bodywork was also redesigned slightly to make it mimic more like the NR750. I'm not sure if Honda did that on purpose or not, but it looked really cool. Now, the RC45, the race version, was a fuel-injected race bike that had won 8 out of the 10 AMA Superbike rounds in 1995. However, during the entire 5-year run, the RC45 only won one single Superbike championship compared to the RC30, which won 2 in just a 3-year run, which left a lot of people kind of disappointed. But the RC45 was still a fantastic motorcycle that could compete. It just had unreasonably high expectations to fill that it just fell short of. And in 1998, we saw the release of the Honda VFR 800 Fi. This is considered the VFR to get. It combines all the best parts of all the VFR production models into one package. This model is called the RC46 and it's the 5th generation of the Honda VFR, featuring an all-new fuel injection system and a new updated 781cc V4 engine. While still retaining the gear-driven cams featured in earlier models, this 5th generation added in a combined braking system and side-mounted radiators as well. It had improvements in weight, power, and technology over the 4th generation and is easily the most sought-after generation to buy even today. In 2002, Honda brought to us the 6th generation VFR 800. The big news with this model is that Honda got rid of their trademark gear-driven cams, which was a disappointment for many. Also, the 6th generation featured VTEC, which works by having the engine operating off of 2 valves per cylinder at lower revs, and at around 6,800 RPMs and beyond it operates off 4 valves per cylinder. The idea is that you get better torque and throttle response on the 2-valve operation, but better high flow and power off the 4 valves in the higher revs. This would also help satisfy emissions and noise regulations along with promoting better fuel economy. However, the system was unrefined and jerky, and as a 6th generation owner I can attest to this. The VTEC transition is not smooth, and in my opinion the bike lost a little bit of its character by dropping the gear-driven cams. Weight was also increased and storage space was reduced, thanks to the undertail exhaust, which does look really nice, but was the cause of the lost storage space and gained weight, and not just any weight but high up weight, which made the bike feel a lot less sporty. However, the exhaust did look a lot cooler and it helped clean up the rear wheel a little bit. I love my 6th generation VFR, but I would be lying if I said it was perfect. It has a lot of glaring issues and is definitely an overall downgrade from the 5th generation. However, I do prefer the looks of the 6th generation though, even though I am definitely in the minority there. In 2006, Honda updated the 6th generation. The bike is mostly the same, but with updating wiring and a revised VTEC transition, which helped prevent the bike from jumping between 4 valves and 2 valves because it kept the transition at 6,400 RPM and it would stay at 4 valves per cylinder until the engine got below 6,100 RPMs, which means you can cruise at 6,400 RPMs and let the revs drop to 63, 65, it doesn't matter where, and you'll stay in 4 valves the whole time, opposed to it turning on and off like a light switch like the previous generation. Some aesthetic changes would also include clear indicated lenses for the front and the rear, which was a nice little touch, and an updated instrument cluster as well as white gauges. Other than that though, everything remained exactly the same. In 2009, Honda shook the world when it released the 7th generation VFR. This was a completely different bike in every sense of the word. This was the Honda VFR 1200F. The idea of this bike is almost a combination of the Honda Blackbird and the VFR. It's meant to be a cross-country touring bike. It featured a 1237cc V4 engine that made 170 horsepower and an electronically limited 158 mph top speed. A lot of people though didn't really like the new VFR. It no longer featured VTEC, which was nice, and it was a lot more powerful, but it got a lot heavier too, weighing over 50 pounds more than the 6th generation. Also, the fuel tank size was reduced as well, being a 5.8 gallon capacity on the 6th generation and only a 4.9 capacity on the 7th generation, which makes no sense considering this bike was meant to be a cross-country touring bike. Looks-wise, it really took a step back as well with the big single cyborg headlight. It didn't win any beauty contests. It's overall a good bike, but it lacks a lot of the soul and character that the VFR had, and it's not really an Interceptor in my mind. The VFR 1200 also had an optional automatic transmission, once again adding to the lack of soul that it had. Alas, in 2014, Honda announced the arrival of the new 8th generation Honda VFR 800, which Honda just calls the Interceptor. It also could be called the RC51 as well. The 8th generation still has VTEC and even uses the exact same engine as the 6th generation developed in 2002. However, this time they mounted the radiators to the front instead of the sides to make the bike a little bit more narrow and lighter. In addition to this, Honda removed the undertail exhaust in favor of a more traditional side-mounted pipe. These changes allowed Honda to shed the weight of the VFR by over 20 pounds. The bodywork was completely redone to feature a new LED headlight and new fairings all around. The wheels are a lot lighter and the rear wheel features an 8-spoke design. The front turn signals are now integrated into the mirrors as well. The 8th gen is sold in 2 different models, the Standard and the Deluxe. The Deluxe adds self-canceling turn signals, ABS, traction control, and heated grips. And in the United States, they are only being offered in white or red. Unfortunately, the 8th generation sales are not doing so well, and currently on Honda's website they appear to still offer it, but only up until the 2015 year, which means that it most likely will be killed off once again, which is sad because it's a really awesome motorcycle, and if I had the space I wouldn't hesitate to buy one. One more little note, Honda did release the VFR 1200X, but it is not reminiscent at all with the previous VFRs and shares nothing but a name and an engine from the 7th generation VFR 1200. Anyway, that's it guys, a complete history on the Honda VFR, how we got from this to this. I love the history aspect of the V4 racing bikes, otherwise known to us as the VFR. It is a shame Honda moved away from the sporty aspect of the VFRs, but I do welcome the more commuting-friendly style of the 6th and 8th generations. But I never really bought into the mass cross-country touring 1200 that much. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, then please do me a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe. A ton of effort goes into these videos and I hope it shows. In order for me to continue making videos like this, then I absolutely need your support. If you really want to help out too, you can also share this video. That would mean the world to me if you could do that. Anyway, thank you again for watching and I hope you all have a great day.